Welcome to your Bible guide. We're going to be looking at Exodus chapter 14 today, and we've been examining this amazing story of God's deliverance for the Israelites from Egypt. They have been held in captivity, slavery to the Egyptians for 400 years, over 400 years, and God rose up Moses to be their deliverer, and we saw all the amazing miracles and the plagues that he had put on, especially the final plague of the death of all the firstborn. And they celebrated the first Passover, and then they immediately got out of Egypt, and God showed them a lot of favor, and so they're taking all this stuff with them. They start getting on their journey, and we get to this point now, and we're going to see what happens in this part of the story. And so let's look at Exodus chapter 14, and I have the Faith Life Study Bible on the side. This is Logos Bible software. It's a free software you can. There are upgrades that cost, but everything that will be on your screen today is free that you can download and really study the Word of God. And so let's start just reading through this and make some comments here. Chapter 14, verse 1. It says, Then the Lord said to Moses, Tell the people of Israel to turn back and encamp in front of Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, in front of Baal-zephon. And you shall encamp facing it by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the people of Israel, they are wandering in the land, the wilderness has shut them in. Right? So God's kind of leading them to this area, and God has a plan, right? God showed up in the form of a pillar of fire at night, a pillar of cloud at day, and he's leading the Israelites where he wants them to go. And he's setting up this ideal spot for God to really do something significant in this situation here. And so they're getting to this spot. Pharaoh's gonna get word, figure out here's where they're going, here's where they are, and verse 4. Okay, it says, "I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them, and I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his host, and the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord." Okay, now so this is the point of this story here. It's revealed by God. He says, "I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart." Right? So remember, Pharaoh had been bouncing back and forth. Oh, I'll let him go. No, I'm not going to let him go. No, I will let him. Right? And then finally, after the final plague, he says, "Get out of here. I don't want you anymore." But now that he lost them, right now that they are gone, he's kind of having that seller's remorse here, and so it says he's going to get his heart hardened. But this is all for the intent that God's going to get the glory. And now here's the thing that we're going to be looking at this story in here is sometimes in our lives, and sometimes in the way things are going, it kind of looks like you get in situations where things look hopeless, right? And I get that, right? Sometimes, man, things just look hopeless. I don't know what to do. This is not how I wanted it to go. There are some times where you make choices, really bad choices, and you reap the consequences of that. That's not the choice, the situation here, right? They're being led by God. Right? So they're being led by God, but even being led by God sometimes, it doesn't look like you want it to, right? The things don't go the way you want it to. So even when we're led by God, sometimes the situation doesn't look great, okay? And so in here though, we see God being in the movie says, "But I do stuff for my glory," right? This is about God, and we need to take our focus off of ourselves and say, how does God fit into this thing? Because that's really the more important thing. And what he wants them to see, he says, "And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord," right? That I'm the God of gods, that I'm greater than. That's his goal. It says, and they did so. Okay, verse 5, it says, "When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, the mind of Pharaoh and his servants was changed toward the people," right? Okay, the people got out, and then he's like, wait a second, what's going on here? And here's what it says. "The mind of Pharaoh and his servants was changed for the people. And they said, 'What is this we have done, that we have let Israel go from serving us? We lost this great situation. We had these, thousands and thousands, maybe up to 1 million slaves. And now we just let them leave. And now we're going to have to do all that work,' right? Like we liked our previous arrangement. So he made ready his chariot and took his army with him and took 600 chosen chariots and all the other chariots of Egypt with officers over all of them." Okay, so he gets up his army. It kind of looks like some of the best of his army, the best of the best. And he gets the chariots. Remember, all the Israelites, they're walking on foot, and so now the Pharaoh is coming with chariots. And he took 600 chosen chariots and all the other chariots of Egypt with officers over all of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the people of Israel while the people of Israel were going out defiantly. The Egyptians pursued them, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, and his horsemen and his army, and overtook them and camped at the sea by Pi Haharoth. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Probably not right. In front of Baal Zephon. Right? So he's get his army together, and he's like, okay, here's where we know they're at. Let's go find them. When Pharaoh drew near, the people of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they feared greatly. Okay, so this is the same group of people that had just seen God time after time after time miraculously doing things they couldn't even imagine or believe. Right? So this is the same people. But, sometimes like we follow God and we get in these situations and we get full of fear. Right? Like I think we can identify with these guys, with the Israelites here, because okay, when I'm in the moment, it's hard to trust God sometimes. And so we see, I'm not saying we should be this way, right? Because obviously they shouldn't. But I'm just saying, realistically, that's how we get. Oh man, even though God stepped in time after time with my finances, this time I'm afraid, right? Because I don't have the money. This time I got sick. This time, fill in the blank. And some of our response is fear. Because they're seeing what's in front of us, right? And they're seeing through eyes of the flesh, not eyes of faith. Right? They're just seeing, here's what's in front of me. Big army coming, chariots, warriors, and we're just walking on foot. And now I'm afraid. Okay, and it says the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. Okay? They cry out. They said to Moses, right? We're going to see their lack of faith coming here. Is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us in bringing us out of Egypt? Is not this what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians. For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. Right? This is sometimes our response of like, even when we give our lives to the Lord, and usually we feel this great weight lifted, but then it gets hard to follow Christ. Right? We got to give up sin. We got to have faith. We got to put our trust in Him. We got to be generous with our money. We got to serve those around us. We got to be a witness. And that can be really challenging and difficult sometimes. And God asks us, to do tough things, right? Like the life of being a Christ follower is not always easy. And what they're saying here, the Israelites are like, man, I kind of wish we would just go back to how it was. Okay, and you're like, well, you were slaves, right? We're like, yeah, we were, but we think that would be easier. Yeah, sometimes it might feel like it'd be easier to not follow Jesus. Okay, that's how your feelings would be. Okay, your feelings typically lie to you, but that's how you're going to feel sometimes when things get hard. So it continues on. It says, and Moses said to the people. Okay, so Moses, we need these Moses in our lives to just remind us of truth. So our feelings don't always have truth in them. Okay, just because you feel something, that doesn't mean it's true. Okay, sometimes it is, right? Sometimes they overlap. Sometimes, though, they don't. Right? We're going to see in this situation, they didn't have reason to fear. They needed faith. Okay, but here's what he says. Fear not, stand firm, see the salvation of the Lord, which He will work for you today. And I love that advice. Okay, really just a couple things. Fear not, stand firm, and see. And this is what we're instructed to do. And I think this carries over to today. Not that we're always going to get the Red Sea experience here, but this is what we're called to do. Okay, fear not, stand firm. Okay, and sometimes fearing not and standing firm, we see throughout the Bible, literally gets people killed. This is where we get martyrs, right? They did that. They weren't afraid. They stayed firm, and it didn't work out. Okay? Hebrews chapter 11, it gives all these stories of faith, and at the end of the chapter it says, well, these guys had faith, but it didn't go well for them. Like we want our faith. If we have it, we want it to go well for us. But that's not the guarantee of the Bible. Okay, but it was right here, right? Moses is like, hey, watch. Here's what's going to happen. Okay, I love this next verse. It might be the most important verse in this whole section I highlighted here. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent. God's gonna fight for you. Okay, if we're really living out this God faith-filled life. Because sometimes like we feel like we have to do all the fighting. Oh, I just got to work harder. I just got to put more effort into it. Oh, I just got to do that. We need to have the recite. God's going to do the fighting for us. Okay, which means we have to have faith in his ability to fight for us. Okay, and we can't just be like, oh, God's going to do it and I'm not going to put any effort. That's not what it's saying. But the idea that like I'm having faith and trust that God's really the one that can do anything. He's the only one. You only have to be silent. Like you don't have to do anything here. The Lord said to Moses, verse 15, why do you cry to tell me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward. Okay, and this is hard because it's like, wait a second. So how they would have been is this the sea, the Red Sea would have been on one side, the Israelite or the Egyptian armies come on the other side, and they're kind of stuck there. There's nowhere to go, right? And here God is like, hey, quit crying, Moses. What are you crying to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward. And they like turn around and was like, well, going forward is in the water, right? Like they didn't have the concept, they didn't even have the idea that the deliverance God's going to do was going through the water, right? They didn't have that idea. Like that had never been done. That wasn't even a thought, right? Like God can do that. They weren't even thinking of it. But that's what God is telling Moses to do. Lift up your staff, stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, that the people of Israel may go through the sea on dry ground. Okay, this is just an unbelievable thing. Like in Moses, I don't think he knew what was going to happen either. I think Moses had faith. Okay, God, you see that we're in this pickle. Now's a good time to like do something, right? And he's like, okay, turn around, go forward, and you're gonna go through the sea. Okay, now just I don't want to go tons of times on this. There's lots of debate. I just want you to be aware. There's lots of debate over where this crossing place took, where it happened. Okay, and there's even some translation things. In the Hebrew, it's Sea of Reeds, not the Red Sea. We get Red Sea from the Septuagint, which was the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, and that's what they stuck with. And there's different bodies of water. You got the Suez and the Aqaba. They're all kind of in there, and so we don't really know. There's been some guys who have done a lot of research on it, some cool videos on YouTube and stuff, but we really don't know. And it doesn't matter tons. Like it would be nice to know, but it doesn't matter tons. But what we do know is what God did. Okay, and so he keeps going on here. Verse 17, it says, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they shall go after them. And I highlight this part. I will get glory. Remember, this is about God. This story's about God. Okay, when we make life about us, we miss the glory of God. I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his hosts, his chariots and his horsemen, and the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord. Right? This is the whole point. Right? He already said this. He's reminded him. Here's how it's going to happen now. Okay, because as we go through life and as we go through difficult things, like we need God reminding us these things, because I think we just can get discouraged and we can get, oh, well, how is this going to work out? And it's not working out. And so God's being gracious and being like, hey, I'm going to keep giving you the information. Just stay faithful. Just stay faithful. Because a lot of times God steps in right at the end. I mean, that's just how God works. Like time and time in the Bible, right? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when do they get delivered? They don't get delivered till they're thrown into the fiery furnace, right? That's where the deliverance happens, right? All these stories, a lot of times it doesn't happen till right when, nothing could go worse. That's when it happens, okay? And so he says, I'm going to get the glory, and I'm going to do it this way, and here's what's going to happen. All the Egyptians shall know I'm the Lord when I've gotten glory over Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. Then the angel of God, who was going before the host of Israel, moved and went behind them. Okay, so he was in front of them, probably pushing them up to the Red Sea, and then he comes behind them, in between the army. Okay, so coming between the host of Egypt and the host of Israel, and there was the cloud and the darkness, and it lit up the night without one coming near the other all night. Right, so it's kind of giving this picture. So enter into that scene. You're with the Israelites. You got ocean one side. Pharaoh and his armies coming this side. God steps in between. Verse 21, then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. Okay, so a lot of people read this and they try to like, okay, maybe during that time of year there was this wind, and they, there's all these theories out there about how this could happen in a natural sense. I read this and I'm like, maybe it did. Maybe God strategically chose a more shallow place and a place that could do this, and maybe there was a tide that brought certain things in. To me, I don't care. It's saying that this is something the Lord did. Okay, Moses stretches out his hand over the sea, and the Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind. Okay, it does say he uses wind, right? That's what we do know. He uses some sort of form of wind. Um, I'm just imagining, the force of the type of wind that is so strong that it can move water in that kind of level, right? Like even if it was a small area, to use it at that level would have been something um, like just everyone would have been aware of, right? All the Israelites are going to see this wind and party, and you're like, what is going on? Um, Anyways, it's just an amazing thing to think about. And it says, and the people of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, the waters being a wall to them on their right and on their left, right? So it drove, the wind blew in so hard that it literally piled up. It says the waters on each side, right? I mean, what an amazing sight. And as you're like walking through it, I mean, this would have been incredible, right? So like it's one thing to watch it, and then it's like, okay, now I got to step out in faith, right? Because we see faith developed all through this, right? Because even though the wall's divided, I would be a little cautious, being like, well, what happens if the wind stops, the water falls, that kind of stuff. But we see them at least have enough faith to say, you know what, God did this. I'm gonna step out. I'm gonna start walking through. Okay, so there's this walls on each side. Verse 23 says, the Egyptians pursued and went in after them into the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. And in the morning watch, the Lord in the pillar of fire and the cloud looked down on the Egyptian forces and threw the Egyptian forces into a panic, clogging their chariot wheels so that they drove heavily. Okay, and so we get this picture. So imagine like we don't know the exact number of how many were crossing, but it was a significant amount. Okay, probably hundreds of thousands, up to maybe a million, right? There's kind of debate on how many people were actually there. And so like that would have taken a while, especially depending on how wide the area was that they went across. Some people say it was miles, some people say it was shorter. If you're going across, a million people, a handful of miles across the place, that's going to take a while. And you got animals, you got little kids, right? This is not something that just happened in 20 minutes. This is taking hours to do. And so it seems like the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire kind of kept them at bay. And then at some point they started coming through. And it kind of uses this language in the morning watch, the Lord in the pillar of fire and a cloud looked down. Okay, so somehow God was within the pillar of fire and cloud, and he's looking down at the situation. And it says he's putting them all into a panic, right? So they start going through. Their chariot wheels are getting clogged up, and they're not getting through quickly. Okay, and here's what the Egyptians said: let's flee from before Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians. Okay, here's something you just got to know as we're going through these stories, is there's this idea that God fights for us. Okay, like that's kind of through is the thing that we have is we have God's presence, and that God fights for us. Right, He's the one who can do the battle. He's the one who's powerful enough. He's the one who's significant enough. Right, like remember this whole thing. Right, like Israel escapes from Egypt, from their slavery, without lifting a sword. Right, they didn't like get this military coup and attack them and then leave. They didn't do anything. They just eventually just picked up their stuff after the Passover, and they just went out because they recognize this. And okay, now remember, part of this whole thing that God says He's doing this is, I'm going to get glory. Egyptians, they're going to know that I am the true God. Right? And here they're acknowledging, let's flee before Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians. Verse 26, then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea. Okay, so they've gotten the other side, that the water may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen. So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its normal course when the morning appeared. And as the Egyptians fled into it, the Lord threw the Egyptians into the midst of the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, and of all the host of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea, not one of them remained. Okay, so it doesn't say necessarily they all went in, but it says everyone who went in didn't make it, right? So they're going through, there's a chance maybe Pharaoh was kind of waiting on the other side. Often you send your army in first. Um, but everyone who went in, it was their grave. Okay, it was their last thing. So the waters returned, covered the chariots, horsemen, all the host of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea. Not one of them remained. But the people of Israel walked on dry ground through the sea. Okay, so it's contrasting. Okay, here's what happened with the Pharaoh. They got all their wheels clogged up, threw in a panic, and then eventually the sea came on them. But Israel, on the other hand, the people of God, they walked through on dry ground. The waters being a wall to their right and their left. Verse 30. And here's kind of the concluding thought here. Thus the Lord saved Israel. Okay, and I highlighted that section, the Lord saved Israel, because this is a huge, huge theme in the Bible, is that the God of the universe saves his people, rescues his people. Okay, this is what distinguishes you from being a follower of God, is an understanding that only God can save and rescue us. Okay, later in the New Testament, we will look at the person of Jesus, and we have to acknowledge, hey, we're like the Egyptians. We're like this group of people, and only God can save us. Okay, this is just a constant from Genesis to Revelation, is humans are in need of being saved. And we see this example, and this is kind of this kind of type. The Lord saves. Like he's the one who rescues us. I'm not saying humans can't ever do cool things. Humans can't, there's been some amazing movies and depictions of warriors and armies and rescues and stuff like this. But ultimately, we need to learn God fights the battle, and God is the one that saves. So he saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. So they're looking across and somehow can see the Egyptians are dead on the seashore. Okay, after the stuff came in, must have washed them up somehow. Israel saw the great power that the Lord used against the Egyptians. Okay, and here's the response, and here's where we need to end. So the people feared the Lord. Okay, so remember at the beginning, they were afraid of the Egyptian armies, right? They're afraid of the chariots. Okay, and here it says now the people fear the Lord. Okay, now this doesn't mean they're like scared of God per se, but they're growing in this idea like, whoa, God can do these things. Okay, that should make us pause a little bit, because when we respect God the way we're supposed to respect God, okay, that's when we get this kind of fear. Okay, there's unhealthy fear, and then there's a good fear, right? Because like we read in the New Testament, oh well, God's love casts out all fear. Okay, it casts out the bad kind of fear. Okay, but we're supposed to have a healthy respect for God and who He is, and they see that when like God did this crazy amazing thing, they're like, whoa. Okay, and it says so the people feared God. Okay, so here's this thing. This fear leads to the next section. It says, and they believed in the Lord. Okay, so the people feared God, feared the Lord, and then they believed in the Lord and in His servant Moses. Right? So it kind of grows. So what happens is as we go through life and we move from fear to faith, something actually builds inside of us where we can grow. Okay, now there's going to be this great celebration, this song, and then they're going to go right back into doubting God again and grumbling. But God is kind of working something through us. Okay, and that happens in our own lives when we see God step in, even sometimes at the last moment. There's something that builds inside of us. Okay, but if you never have faith, and if you never grow in the fear of the Lord, even, okay, you're not going to see those things. Yeah, you're just going to be constantly doubting. Okay, New Testament says, hey, you're double-minded. Like the person, this is what James says. A person looks in the mirror and then like forgets what you saw. Right? But God wants to build this faith inside of us. He wants to build that. Okay, and He builds off of our understanding of who He is and who we are in comparison. Okay, do we look at God as like, yeah, God is the Savior of my life, or do we say, you know what, I'm going to save my own life by my own work, my own effort, my own religiousness, my own wealth? Right? That's what the kind of things we do. Okay, do we let our faith build off of a healthy understanding of who God is, or do we just try to do our own thing? And these are some of the lessons that we learn in this story. But ultimately, at the end, God receives the glory.